Shadow Groudon is making its way into Pokemon Go coming up very soon. And we want to know, is this Pokemon going to be worth going after for multiple of these? And what's the strategy behind Shadow Groudon in Pokemon Go? We're going to break all of that down in this video. So welcome to the Trainer Club. Here we go. I'm excited about Shadow Groudon. I hope you guys are too, and hopefully you guys have caught Shadow Kyogre. And if you guys maybe got a bad one, you're not super impressed with what you got, don't fear, guys, because remember, these Shadow Legendaries, while they may not be the most soon appearance into raid battles, they do eventually and will make their way into raid battles, because as of right now, we have Shadow Raikou in raid battles, we've had Shadow Mewtwo in raid battles, and then they get introduced with the shiny forms of the Shadow Legendary. So there's always that to fall back on, but it would be pretty cool to help you guys get this Pokemon with a good IV, and the best way to be able to do that for me personally is to use your Super Rocket Radar when it is sunny weather outside, because Groudon is going to be an all-ground type Pokemon. Just as a reminder, Kyogre is going to leave the battles on Wednesday the 27th at 10 a.m. So if you do want another one, even if it's not going to be rainy weather, guys, please make sure to catch one. I plan to catch another Kyogre, and then I plan to catch at least 2 Groudons as well. Hopefully one of them will turn out to be a good IV. So with that said, as we do analyze almost every Pokemon in the game, if it's worthwhile, we're going to analyze Shadow Groudon in Pokemon Go. Groudon is an all-ground type Pokemon. It's a very strong Pokemon ever since, especially it did get Precipice Blades. And just as a reminder, this Pokemon does max out at a pretty good clip as well, at 4,652 at the 100% IV at level 50. And if you best buddy, it can go all the way to level 51. It has an attack of 270, a defense of 228, and a stamina of 205. So it's a very attacker-heavy Pokemon. And guys, just as a reminder, the Shadow does make the attack value even higher. It does drop the defense, but for meta attacker purposes, that's really good for us. But maybe for PvP, could potentially hinder that Pokemon a little bit, but we're going to analyze that as well. So this Pokemon will be weak to 3 total things, which is going to be water, it's going to be grass, and it's going to be ice. And it's going to double resist electric, single resist poison, as well as rock. And as far as the moveset goes, it gets 2 fast moves, which is going to be Mud Shot, which is a pretty good PvP move, and Dragon Tail, which is also a really good multi-purpose move for PvP, especially if you've been going up against a lot of dragon Pokemon. And then as far as its charge moves, it's going to get 2 elite TMable moves, but the non-elite TMable moves will be Earthquake, Fire Blast, and Solar Beam. Solar Beam hits really hard, especially when we're countering with water type Pokemon. And the 2 elite TM moves are going to be Fire Punch and Precipice Blades, which are the 2 recommended PvP moves, which will require 2 elite TMs if you plan to use this Pokemon in that regard. And just as a reminder, Groudon does have a shiny, but when you catch it from Giovanni, the Shadow Shiny is not available until it makes it into raid battles. And the 100% IVs for Groudon are going to be under non-sunny conditions, 927, or weather boosted. In sunny weather, if you catch it from Giovanni, it's going to be 1528. Okay, so now let's see what is going to be the best moveset overall for Groudon, and what's going to be the strongest, the Primal, the Shadow, and the regular, and where do they sit? Because we do know that the Megas and the Primals are the strongest in the game, followed by the Shadows, and then followed by the regulars, but how close will their stats actually be? Starting at the top, we have the strongest moveset and type in the game, which is going to be Primal Groudon, Mud Shot, and Precipice Blades at 57.22 in comparison to the Earthquake at 50.31. So right off the bat, guys, I know it does take an elite TM to be able to get it, but man, oh man, does that really make a massive difference in how strong this Pokemon is. It took it from pretty good competition with the Garchomp, which we will see in a bit, and it absolutely catapulted it up at a much further pace. And then if you're looking at a fire move, guys, it's going to be Fire Blast at 48.63 with the Dragon Tail, and then the Shadow Groudon is actually going to be Mud Shot and Precipice Blades at 48.23. So if we are looking at these 2 comparisons, wow, that Primal is very strong. However, you can only use 1 active Mega or Primal type Pokemon, so it is good to have backups, because obviously since they're so strong, we only have 1 available, and this makes sense to have this Groudon in here as well, especially if it does do really well in the ground attacker category, which we're going to check out here shortly, but let's check out the regular Groudon first. And I also want to point out the Solar Beam at 48.41, which we will analyze fire charge moves and grass charge moves to see where these Pokemon do sit. If we go onto the second page, you can see the Dragon Tail Precipice Blades. You can also see other things such as Shadow Groudon with the Fire Blast and so forth. And then the regular Groudon actually pops up with Mudshot and Precipice Blades at 42.32, which is 6 points below the Shadow, which is still pretty impressive. And then if you want to go to the third page and see where all the rest do have there, including Return, because it eventually will get that moveset, you can see it here. So now let's check it out in the ground category, and then we'll check it out with the charge attacks as grass and the charge attacks as fire to see if this Pokemon with either of the moveset as a meta attacker does hit one of the top spots. As the top ground type attackers in the game, we have Primal Groudon at Mudshot and Precipice Blades at 47.22, and it did topple the Mega Garchomp at Earth Power, which is a Calm Day move at 49.7. Followed very closely by Shadow Groudon, Mudshot Precipice Blades at 48.23. Then we have the Shadow Garchomp at 43.84, Shadow Excadrill 42.67, regular Groudon at 42.32, followed by Landorus, Shadow Mamoswine, Shadow Rhyperior, and Mega Swampert. So like I talked about, that Precipice Blades really put this Pokemon in a new class of elite attacker Pokemon in the ground category, which I totally think it deserves because, guys, we're talking about totally different types of Pokemon. We're talking about a primal legendary Pokemon in comparison to a pseudo-legendary, which is still pseudo-legendary, but man, it does deserve where it does sit. And also, that Shadow Groudon is looking mighty good, but also at the same time, a few points below, 4 points, is going to be that Shadow version of that Garchomp, which is still quite enticing, especially when they do come back into Shadow battles. Please make sure to try to get as many as possible and hopefully get a good one or two, because that Pokemon doesn't require paid XL candy, which I'm always a fan of, trying to save your guys' resources. So now let's check it out in the grass and then the fire. In the grass category, the top Pokemon is going to be Fury Cutter Frenzy Plant on the Mega Sceptile at 49.64, but actually in the second spot we have the Primal Groudon with the Dragon-Tail Solar Beam at 48.41. That is above actually a Mega Latios with Solar Beam at 45.34, above the Mega Gallade that's not out yet, and even above the Kartana at 42.15. Wow, this Pokemon sits above the Kartana with Solar Beam, which is very impressive. So for me personally, my secondary charge move for a meta attacker Pokemon is definitely going to be Solar Beam on my Groudon. But before we get into the fire category, guys, we're looking at Mega Venusaur with Frenzy Plant. We have the Xurkitree with Power Whip and the Shadow Groudon at the bottom, above a lot of these Pokemon still, with the Solar Beam at 40.67. That's above the Latios, the Groudon, the Volcarona, Taproot, Bulu, Shadow Gallade, Roserade, and Shaman. So pretty impressive overall. So now let's check it out in the fire category. In the fire category, at the top we have Mega Blaziken with Counter and Blast Burn at 50.94, followed by the Mega Charizard Y with Fire Spin and Blast Burn at 50.71. Then we have the Mega Mewtwo that you can't forget about with the Flamethrower at 49.76. And then in the fifth spot overall, we have the Primal Groudon with Dragon Tail and Fire Blast at 48.63, followed by the Mega Mewtwo X. Mega Garchomp with Fire Blast, pretty impressive there at 46.51. That's not too much further behind that Groudon. And then we have Reshiram, 45.81, Mega Charizard, and Shadow Mewtwo. So for me personally, Mega Sceptile does do really well, but for the secondary charge attack as a meta attacker, because I will have a secondary one, I would go with the Solar Beam, even though Kartana does do a lot of weight. Reshiram is not too far behind either, so you have two legendaries that are actually sitting and supporting that, but the Groudon is the second spot in the grass type attacker category, which is very impressive. So where does it sit now in GBL? In the Great League, it's going to be ranked 558. Man, I know lots of stats here, guys, but we want to make sure that you guys max out everything and not waste any of your resources in Pokemon Go. In the Ultra League, it's going to be ranked 413, but in the Master League, it is going to be ranked 7 in the normal form with Mudshot, Precipice Blades, Fire Blast. It will require 2 Elite TMs. So this puts me into a situation of what do we do with this Pokemon and how do we handle it? So for me personally, if I'm going as having multiple of these Pokemon as meta attackers, I would prefer that you guys have one for GBL and that you could also use Fire Punch against other Pokemon. And then if you were going the other direction and you wanted Solar Beam, you would obviously have to have another one, because if you Elite TM a move onto a Pokemon like Fire Blast, you're not going to want to Elite TM another time if you TM it away. So don't do that. I prefer not. But at the same time, this one outperforms the Shadow at rank 21 in the Shadow form. So while Shadow Groudon extremely effective as a meta attacker for the PvP GBL purpose, the regular is better because the bulk is able to help it be performing a little bit better than the Shadow version that is going to drop the defense. But for GBL, we're looking for a little bit more defensive of Pokemon here in this situation, when sometimes the Shadow does outperform, in here it does not. So as far as Shadow Groudon, do I suggest you get multiple of them? Well, I do. I really like this Pokemon, but I also would be a little bit patient. But since the raids will come out about at some point, the need to be so patient on all of these shadow legendaries is not as needed. However, for the Groudon and the Kyogre, we don't know how far into the future it will be until we are able to get these Pokemon populating raids, because they just made their way into Giovanni, and a lot of those other shadow legendaries made their way into Giovanni multiple years ago before they made it into these raids. But who knows, guys? Alrighty, y'all, that's gonna do it. Thank you guys for tuning in, as always, to all of my likers, commenters, subscribers, Patreon members. Everybody takes your support, subscription, participation to X level. I'm gonna see you guys out on the next video. Peace. I want to take this time to thank everybody who supports me in every facet. It means the world to me, and an extra special thank you to all my Patreons. I greatly appreciate the extra support to continue to allow me to pursue Pokemon Go full time, allowing me to create my daily video uploads in the most timely fashion for everyone's benefit. Plus, I get the amazing experience of sharing my creative processes behind the scenes and raiding all around the globe with select upper tiers. Thank you everybody for being a part of the Trainer Club. You all mean the absolute world to me, and I will see you guys out on the next video.